When you look at the New World Order that seems to have been laid out at the Munich Security Conference, how important is this for voters when they go to the polls on Sunday in Germany?
Well, let me make 2 points. First, of course, you are absolutely right that what happened in Munich is what we call in German, an obvious sign of the Zeitenwende, of the massive change in international relationships, beginning change, apparently, of the relationship between the United States and Russia, etc. So important things are happening. That's obvious. Second point is, in the German election campaign, these questions, if you ask me, should have had a priority place. But they didn't. The German election campaign focused on 2 other issues, which are admittedly for the German citizen very important. One is migration, and the other one is the flagging German economy. But I regret, as a foreign policy person, as a former diplomat, as the president of the Munich Security Conference Foundation, I regret the fact that we have not spent more time in this election campaign thinking and debating about what Europe, what Germany in particular, should do, must do now in order to defend European interests and make sure that our interests, for example, with respect to Ukraine, are not going to be ignored by Russia, the United States, and possibly others.
Yeah, but Professor, what does Europe need to now do most urgently? There's a number of reports that a number of presidents or heads of state will travel to Washington. Does Europe need to go at it alone, or do they need to negotiate with Donald Trump?
Well, of course, we will need to negotiate with Donald Trump. We are members of one and the same alliance. Let's not forget that there is still NATO, and NATO is the framework in which we've been working together for practically 3 generations. But it's also true that Europe, as such, has not been able to come up with a clear plan supported by appropriate capabilities. That's the European problem, and this is why I support those. I advocate for a more credible European Union in the area of foreign policy, security, and defense. We need to get our act together. We need to speak with one voice in these matters, and we need to spend more. That's also quite obvious. So in other words, we have a very full plate in front of us, and the next German Chancellor, who will be elected this weekend, will need to respond to these international concerns, in addition to the domestic concerns which I just mentioned, migration and the economy.
Ambassador, will Friedrich Merz, who looks like Germany's next chancellor, be able to lead Europe and Germany out of the mess it's in?
Well, what I know Friedrich Merz quite well. In fact, I have to admit, for transparency reasons, that my wife has actually written a biography of Friedrich Merz. So at our kitchen table, we've been talking a lot about him. I know that he is a very, very committed European. He served in the European Parliament before he became a leader in the German setup. And I know that he is totally aware that if there is no adequate Franco-German, Polish, etc. leadership in the European Union, no leadership will be possible. I think he knows that, he accepts it, and I have very positive expectations that he will meet these expectations as soon as he is actually elected, which unfortunately, under our German system with coalition treaties needing to be worked out, which actually may take several weeks, it may last until way into the month of March, maybe until the end of March.
Yeah. But Ambassador, is this your biggest concern, that if it takes a very long time to build a coalition, it'll be very difficult and very painful to push also through some of the reforms that the German economy so badly needs? Forget even what Europe needs on defense.
I'll be the first to admit that these German elections are not coming at the best moment. Absolutely, it would have been much better if we had an election before Donald Trump started his rather fundamental policy changes on a number of issues, the EU-US relationship in terms of tariffs and trade, the Ukraine issue, and a number of others. But this is the way it is now, and it is a bit unfortunate that we are not going to be doing, from the German side, what Emmanuel Macron is now trying to do by going to Washington next Monday, talking to President Trump. It would be great if an elected German Chancellor could join him and could chime in and present a united European leadership view. That will have to wait a couple of more weeks, I'm afraid.
Ambassador, do you still see a chance that Europe or others will be able to convince President Trump off the pro-Russian course that he seems to have chosen, or is it too late?
Well, let's see what will emerge. We don't have negotiations yet. What we're having are statements by this side, by that side, about the future of this, how this will be handled. Once negotiations will really seriously start, I think people will realize that this is going to be a difficult, lengthy, complex issue where we will be facing, we, the West, the United States, and Europe, hopefully together, a very, very demanding Russia, a Russia represented by extremely experienced negotiating folks. I have known Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, since 1994, in other words, for 30 years. He is one of the most experienced diplomats that I have had the privilege of meeting in my career. In other words, these are not going to be easy discussions and negotiations. We're dealing with very experienced, very, very crafty folks on the Russian side. So don't expect quick results anytime soon. And I think the United States government, the Trump administration, will find out that this Russian regime is a very, very tough nut to crack. That's my view.